We're in this series, going to kind of wrap it up this week. It was a short series on what kind of conversations you might have around your dining room table. You know, as families, what just stuff you might be talking about. A lot of it has dealt. A lot of it. There's only 3 weeks, but if some of it has dealt with like raising your children and just some of those conversations moms and dads might have with their kids. And today is one of those. So last week before, really, my oldest daughter and I, Danielle, we were in Lexington, Kentucky for an international conference on missions, and we were meeting with a friend of ours, a friend and his wife, and having supper, and we're eating and having a good time, and the table next to ours, there's a young couple with about a 9-month-old, I think they said it was a 9-month-old little girl, cute little girl, and we started having a conversation, oh, your little girl's cute, blah, blah, blah. And then our friend stands up and he says, well, hey, he pulls out his phone and says, I got pictures of my 9-month-old little grandson. And if your daughter would be interested in dating, you know, in the future, you know, and he kind of goofed around. And it was hilarious because I'm standing there sitting here thinking, I don't know if this is a good conversation. He's not looking like he's really into this conversation. And the dad kind of looks up very slowly from his food and gives our friend Mark a look that looked a lot like this. He was not at all interested in his daughter dating. As a matter of fact, he said something to the, what did he say? She already thinks she has a boyfriend, and they've kissed and everything. And he was just like, this is like, no. I mean, and of course it was innocent and fun, and we joked and had a good time, went on with our meal. Here's the deal. As parents, you will face this in your life at some point, most likely. The idea of your children dating. How many dads here are excited about their daughters dating? We couldn't find anybody in the first service either. But you know what's going to happen, right? It's just going to happen. Boys meet girls and girls meet boys, and that's been going on for generations, and it's going to continue going on until Jesus comes back. We all know that's how it works, but just the thought of like, well, I mean, it's okay when I was young that I dated, but like, I don't know, it doesn't seem right for the next generation to date. Well, we want them to date, I mean, because, you know, things got to keep going, right? But so here's the question that often Jesus-loving parents might ask. Like, what kind of conversations should I be having with my children about dating? I mean, and when does that conversation start? You know, do you wait till they're 25 and say, okay, you know, now we should have this conversation? Or maybe should that happen sooner in your family relationship? Well, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I'm certainly not the perfect dad, and we're not the perfect family, and I don't have all the answers or anything like that. But I might be a little further down the road than a lot of you, because I am now an official empty nester. We have 2 adult children, both of them daughters. One of them's married, just got married a few months ago. One of them probably will be in the not-too-distant future. No pressure, but we're just saying, things are looking like it could happen someday in the next couple of years. Who knows? I'm not even going to try to pretend to know that. But I can look at our life and say, our transition went really pretty well from teenagers into adulthood and into adult relationships that our daughters are having with these boys and with these men, whatever, you know what I'm saying. I'm still, a lot older than they are, so I guess they're still always be boys, right? Is that how that works? With grandma and grandpa, they're just always kids, right? So anyway, what we're going to look at today is a conversation that you might have with your children about dating around the table when let's say your daughter comes up and says, so there's this boy, right? Or your son, comes up, so there's this girl, right? I mean, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So you might as well be prepared for this whole thing. Here's the question. How can Jesus-loving parents approach their children about dating? That's kind of the big answer of the day. What are we talking about? And that's what it is. Here's some things for you to consider. Again, this isn't necessarily, I don't have a Bible verse for this saying this is how you must do it, but it seems to be a good idea. Number 1, have a plan starting today. And I say starting today because if you don't have a plan yet, get a plan. I don't care how old you are. You might be 14 and don't have children yet, but start thinking about what your plan is with your children, because you know what 14-year-olds are thinking, right? And you know what 16-year-olds, you're not 16 yet. You know what I'm saying? Just start creating a plan, and have that plan based on godly principles and Scripture. Don't just do it the way you were raised. Now, you might have been raised great, and I hope you were, but who knows? Your mom and dad were imperfect, like I am, and they probably weren't 100% perfect. So look to the Scripture for how you're going to formulate your plan. We never really had conversations about dating when I was growing up. I knew that my dad was not a faithful person. I knew that about his dating life. I knew that my mom liked to date lots of people when she was a young adult. She just thought it was fun. It was a World War II era, and she liked dating the soldiers and just having fun and dancing and that kind of stuff. And I knew that. Other than that, it was kind of like we had no guidelines. The birds and the bees talk came from my brothers, which was really awkward because I had no idea what they were talking about, and I was really young, too young for even knowing what that meant. And they were giggling the whole time, and that was my training. Like, enjoy life. So I had to, at a pretty young age, say, okay, I'm a Jesus-following guy. I need to figure out what my plan is. I just decided I needed to come up with a plan, and I would encourage you to do that as well. To do it on the Scripture. Psalm 127 does say, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. You want to build a house of God, your family to be a house of God, a godly family. You want Scripture involved. You want godly counsel involved. So turn to Scripture. It's always been my goal from when I became a Christ follower, moving forward, that I would build a home on godly ideas, not just on mine. Somehow I figured out in fourth grade that I'm not smart enough to know how to do life. I need the counsel of Scripture, and I need the counsel of God. I can't trust my own decisions because I'll do really dumb things because my emotions will take me one way, or my feelings, whatever, and I need to make sure they're on godly principles. And as the adults in your home, I'm talking to the parents, right? Matter of fact, turn to your child right now and say, I am the adult. You have the freedom to do that right now. Because sometimes we forget that, and they might be reminded. As the adults in the home, you're the one who gets to decide when they get to date, who they get to date, how long a date lasts, what a date looks like, who's old enough to date, all that stuff. That's your choice. That's your decision. Now, they might sneak around behind your back and try to do stuff. That's on them. It's on you to decide what the rules are and set those rules for your home. And those questions are best if answered sooner rather than later. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll just revert to the lowest common denominator of their friends, right? Because, little Sally comes in and says her co-worker, the friend at school who's 10 years old is dating a 21-year-old. You're like, you're not going to date a 21-year-old. And they're like, well, they're doing it. It's like, you're not reacting to that. You just already have the rule in place. When you're 10, you don't date someone who's 21. That's a safe rule, isn't it? We're good. You're all good with that? That's not, crazy. But if you have that already decided, it doesn't become an issue and an argument at the heat of the moment. So make a plan early and stick with that plan. Or at least have that long before the issue becomes an issue. And then once you have those ground rules in place, that becomes the topic of conversation around the home. You're not making it up as you go. You already have the rules in place, and it just comes up in the conversation. Our family standards were fairly simple. We didn't have like a 21-page, 14-chapter list of things with dating. We had number one, the person must be a Christ follower. They have to follow, not just go to church, not just kind of like, yeah, sure, I believe, but be a follower of Jesus Christ. And secondly, we really emphasize the purpose of dating in our worldview is to find someone to marry. It's not just to go out and entertain yourself, right? Now, you can disagree with that. My mom would disagree with me on that. But in my world, that's what we taught our children. And because of that, we made our one, I guess this would be our third rule, wouldn't it? One big rule that we over and over stated that you couldn't be under 16 and be dating. Now, that's not a biblical number. That was just what we came up with in our family. But the deal was, the last thing we wanted to do as parents was to light this fire, this passion, and put that in motion of a young child before they really knew how to handle such things. Adults I know don't know how to handle that thing, let alone throw that in the lap of a child and tell them to try to handle that. It just didn't seem right. So really, 16 is kind of young. Now that I'm older and I look at it and think, man, 16 is really young. But it just seemed to be a good thing. Now we made that rule before we became old fuddy-duddies. right? Because like right now I'm thinking 16, man. We made that rule when my wife and I were dating, and she was 18 and I was 20, and we were talking about, hey, if we get married and we have kids, when should we let them date? And as an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old, we're like, 16's plenty. Not before that for sure. So that was from someone who wasn't that far away from 16, that we, and we just kind of believed that was an important thing. Now the beauty about having a rule like that before your child is born is you can bring them up with it. So it's not something you make up on the fly. It's not like you don't dislike the person that they said, I'd like to date so-and-so. It's like they already know at 14, the answer's no. Don't even come with it. I mean, it's what it is. And again, you have that rule already in place. It becomes a part of the conversation of the home. So you're sitting there with your children watching Boy Meets World, and what is it? Topanga throws Corey up against the locker and gives him a big kiss. And you could look at him and say, "Ooh, that's gross. They're not even 16." They're like, "Yeah." It's just part of the conversation of the family. You don't have to have a big speech or a big sermon on it. That's just in their mind. So that's kind of our approach, and it helps reinforce the rule that's already in place. It's part of the conversation of the family. Now here's the funny thing about rules. See, you can have the rule in place, and when it's in place, it's easier to break that rule than to suddenly make a new one. We actually gave our youngest daughter permission to date someone sooner because it was the right person. They met the criteria. We're like, man, they're a Jesus person. We had all these things, and we're like, I could look long term and say, yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with this guy. And so we were able to break a rule rather than to, so there was some grace in there, right? We weren't like totally legalistic about it because it was the right person at the right time. And that just worked in our family. So have a plan. Secondly, lay a godly foundation, which kind of goes along this, but this is foundational stuff. I love Matthew 7. It's talking about Jesus, talking about, hey, if you hear the words I say and do them, I'm going to build a foundation for your family, for your home. I love it in the context of the family. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. Now, it's kind of difficult for parents to imagine their children being in the midst of a storm, but you know what's going to happen. There's going to be tough times that come in their life. You know it. It's been in your life. There have been storms. The winds have come and the rains have come, and you want to have a good foundation for your kids. Verse 26, everyone who hears these words of mine does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. See, if there's one thing I want for my girls, is it's not a financial thing. It's not, I don't know, it's to have a better family life than they even had growing up. We had a really good family life, but I'm hoping that their family life, I'm hoping that my girls' relationship with their husband will be better than mine was with Cheryl. We put a pretty high bar there. But it can be done. It can definitely be done if it's built on a solid foundation here. It's not going to happen by accident. They're not just going to wander into their marriage thinking, well, I just do what Dad did and did what Mom did. It's going to be good. They've got to build on the foundation we've given them. So there's going to be effort on their part, but we want to give them the tools when they get there to at least be able to build on something solid. And that's just a scriptural thing. You build on solid principles. You teach them Jesus. You teach them how Jesus says to live and the Jesus way. It's going to be a solid foundation. Keep God in the center of a relationship. Their marriage will last the test of time. You know it'll be tested. You know it will because they're human. It will last if Jesus is in the center of the relationship of both them and their spouse. You build a home on the foundation of sand, where it's just kind of whatever, you don't really talk about it, whatever happens, then it's going to come crumbling down when trouble comes. And with that in mind, we did our best to lay a godly foundation for our family, for our children. We taught from early on the importance of sexual purity before marriage. We talked often about the idea of honoring God first before that of your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Well, they didn't have girlfriends. Of their, husband. That to be, even before honoring us, they were to honor God. God is first. God is first. We laid that foundation in their home and keeping God in the center of relationship and teaching them how to do that. To be a Christ follower first and let everything else fall in place. That was foundational stuff for our girls growing up. And once that foundation is set, if your children become Christ followers, that's the key too. I mean, they're their own mind, right? They have to choose this on their own. Just because you lay it doesn't mean they're going to build on it. But if they choose to follow Christ, they won't be perfect people either, just like you weren't, just like I wasn't. But they will build the rest of their lives on that foundation that you laid. And the beauty is, even if they stray from that and they come back, the foundation's been laid. Whatever mistakes they might make in their 20s and 30s or whatever, and they come back to it, the foundation's still there. It's still there. You've built that foundation. That's your job as mom and dad. Here's the next thing. Be an active part of their dating life. Now, I'm not saying to sneak in the back row of the movie theater and spy, although that could be fun. I don't know, interesting. Or to sit in the back seat of the car and just monitor. The idea is to have conversations with your children regularly about who they're dating and what's going on in their relationship. Where do you think this is headed? Is this person treating you well? Are you treating them well? How's their relationship with Jesus? I mean, really. I know their mom and dad makes them go to church because that's our first rule, but do they want to come to church? Is there a relationship with Jesus there, or are they playing the game, and where are you with that? Those are good conversations to have. That was the non-negotiable in our family, a Christ follower, right? I mean, not a church attender, a Christ follower. Had to be a person who believed strongly in Jesus. Not that we expected perfection, because we know that person only lived once, but where are they at? Where's their heart in their relationship with Jesus? We have spent years training our children to know God, to give them a foundation, to fall in love with Jesus. We've invested greatly into their eternal souls. The last thing we wanted was some lukewarm, half-hearted Jesus kind of non-believer to, number one, lure our daughters away from Jesus, but number two, to raise our grandchildren in a home that doesn't love Jesus. I mean, what a heartbreak that would be for us. And it may sound a little harsh, right? Because here's the deal: the last thing we want is some dude coming into the mix that will send my grandkids right to hell, right? Which sounds a little harsh, but hell's pretty harsh. We have a Satan who is like a lion roaming to and fro looking for someone to devour. He's after my future grandkids. I know that. I'm not going to spoon feed them to him. He's going to have to work harder than that. So I want a strong relationship between my daughters and the men in their lives, that they'll be Jesus people. So that was our non-negotiable for sure. 2 Corinthians 6:14. This actually does directly address this. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. What partnership does righteousness have with lawlessness? What fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? What portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? This is a heart connection with someone who's not in your own world. You have completely different worldviews, a Christ follower and someone who's not a Christ follower. They might be great people. They might be super duper human beings. They might be wonderful. But if they're not Christ followers, they don't think like you. And oftentimes people will push back and say, well, I'm leading them to Jesus. And it has happened. I know it's happened. It happened in Cheryl's grandparents' life. She was a Christ follower and he wasn't. And she led him to Jesus, and they're a great foundation to our family. But for every one person where has that story that works out, I have at least 10 who I've sat with in my office over the years of someone weeping. Usually it's the wife just weeping because the husband never really made it. He never came in. He kind of hinted like he might, but then he wouldn't. And then children came along, and then there were arguments over how to raise their children. Do you you raise them to follow Jesus, and there's influence from dad saying, don't believe that junk. Mom's just, a weak-willed, whatever. And there's arguments over how much do we support financially the church. I mean, it's just you're not equally yoked. It just doesn't work. Why wish that on your children? It's better off just to set that rule and say, no, we're not gonna, don't do that. Don't go that way. It will save your children years of heartache, honestly. The last thing here, model the kind of person you want them to date. Dads, this is kind of scary if you think about it, but your daughters are going to marry someone a lot like you. I mean, they're just going to. Excuse me. They're looking for a husband that's like you. They might not even consciously be thinking that. They might think you're a dork or whatever. If they, but they're going to find someone who's a lot like you. I'm a lot like Cheryl's dad. I just am. I'm kind of goofy. He was goofy. He's always telling jokes. I was kind of a jokester. I mean, it's just not identical, but a lot of the character traits are very similar. And mom, your sons are going to find someone who's a lot like you. Believe it or not, they're looking. They're looking. Again, it could be subconscious, but that's who they're going to find. So understand how important this is in modeling the kind of parent you should be. That the way you treat your spouse right now is exactly the way your children will expect to be treated by their future spouse. That's kind of weighty. That's kind of weighty. You're teaching them what a husband looks like and acts like. You're teaching them what a wife looks like and acts like, what a marriage relationship looks like. Now, you're not perfect, and you're going to fail, and you're going to have issues, because we all do, and that's real, right? You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to be angry at times, and you're going to say and do things that are inappropriate. But that is real life. Teach them real life. Teach them real life by inviting them into yours to be, they're just going to be, they're watching, whether you know it or not. I don't even know how to measure this, really, but I know there were times over the years that I wasn't feeling it, like the whole being a husband thing. Not like I was going to leave, but just like the whole husbandly duties stuff of helping around the house and stuff, that playing that role. But there were times I had to just suck it up and do it anyway, because I knew my kids were watching. They were watching, and they were going to find someone who looked and acted a lot like me. So there were times I didn't really want to do the dishes, because I was like, I don't want to. I've been working all day. Well, so was my wife. Really? It's her job just because, so there were times I didn't want to, but I'd jump up and help, or didn't want to make breakfast, but I did it. And in our family, Cheryl doesn't even like breakfast, so she never makes breakfast. If someone's going to make breakfast, it's me, and I kind of like making breakfast. But there were times I didn't want to, and did it anyway, or do the laundry. It's like, who wants to do laundry, and I had all these reasons not to, but I would do it anyway. Or there were times I just didn't want to get out of my chair because it's so comfortable. I just want to sit there and just stare mindlessly at the television for a while, which can stretch into too long of a while Cheryl's running around doing all the parenting. So I had to get out. I had to force myself to do it at times. Not like it was a big chore, but there were times when it was a chore, because the last thing I wanted was have my girls grow up and find someone who was as lazy as I really want to be. They had to see someone who wasn't all that lazy, because they're going to find someone who acts a lot like me. Your children will grow up to find someone who uses the same kind of language you use. Are you good with that? Because they're going to be influencing your grandkids. They're going to grow up and find someone who shares your temper. They're going to grow up and find someone who shares your spending habits and how you handle your finances. They're going to find someone who works on their relationship with God as much as you do, because that's what they have modeled. That's what's normal to them. That's what seems right. Someone who has the same weaknesses you have, someone who has the same strengths. Your lifestyle as a parent in the home is totally setting up the success or failure of the home your grandkids are going to grow up in. So you've really got to think multiple generational. It's so easy to get caught up in the moment and what's going on in your life right today, and you've got to think longer term than that when it comes to being a role model and understanding you're influencing future generations. So if you're looking at your family life right now and saying, man, things are really hard, and they might be, I would say suck it up and make it work. Not only for you and your benefit, but for your children and their children after them. If you tend to be weak in some area, then get strong in that area. If you tend to fail in a particular sin often, get that thing conquered. You're going to be passing that on to the next generation. If you are tempted to end your marriage, don't do it. Don't do it because your children are learning it's okay, it's all right, it's normal to do that. They're watching you very closely. They're learning how to do life from the ones who they know best, and that's you. That's you, mom and dad. So here's the deal. Dating doesn't have to be scary. Even when it's your children dating, if you have a godly plan in place, you lay a godly foundation that they'll have to choose to build on themselves, but you lay that anyway. You participate in their lives. You model godliness throughout their lives. They're going to watch you. You model godliness. It's not that scary when they grow up and they're making their own decisions. You look at it and think, hey, that guy's all right. I couldn't have picked a better one. They're doing all right. They're going to make good choices, or that gal's all right. You're raising sons. They picked a godly person. You sit back and you enjoy then the next stage, which we're just getting into, that new stage of life. And it's kind of fun, I have to say. It's really fun. Coming out of Thanksgiving with adult children, it was just kind of a neat experience that I was kind of dreading a few years ago, thinking, I want my perfect little world. And it's like my world's blown up, but it's gotten better. It's gotten better because of these things.